She stood in the council chamber alone, her eyes fixed on the flickering, holographic message that hovered before her, every pixel a promise of peace, but every tone a subtle threat. The air was thick with tension, the room smelled of burnt incense and metal from the circuits that hummed softly under the floor. Her fingers itched to reach for the console to press accept and end the fear that had gripped her people for decades, yet her heart refused to let her betray the countless souls who had suffered in silence. The elders had counseled caution, whispering that compromise could save thousands, but her mind was a storm of fire and defiance. She thought of the villages razed, of the children who had cried themselves to sleep, of the mothers who had begged for mercy that was never given, and she shook her head. No, she could not surrender, not now, not ever. The council members watched her with furrowed brows and trembling hands, some hoping for a miracle, others fearing disaster. Yet she met each gaze with unwavering resolve. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in as the minutes stretched into eternity. The light from the hologram painted her face in shifting shades of blue and green, and she felt the weight of history pressing against her shoulders. She took a deep breath and imagined the faces of her people, those she had grown up beside, those who had laughed and cried with her, those who had fought and fallen alongside her. She imagined them safe and free, and knew that compromise was a cage, the kind that slowly crushed hope. The silence in the room was broken only by the low hum of the hologram and the distant echoes of footsteps in the corridors. Beyond, she stepped forward, her boots scraping the floor. Lightly, the council members flinched at the sound, but she did not hesitate, her voice low and steady. When she spoke, it cut through the tension like a blade. "I will not sign the treaty, I will not bow, I will not surrender." She let the words hang in the air, watching as disbelief flickered across their faces. Some whispered that she was mad, others dared not speak for fear that their words would betray them. As she turned from the hologram, she felt a surge of clarity, a sense that the path ahead would be perilous, but it would be hers to choose. She imagined the enemy forces waiting beyond the borders, their ships like shadows in the void, ready to crush any resistance. But she saw more than fear. She saw opportunity, the chance to rally humanity, to stand as one, to defy the ones who thought them weak, to show that courage was not measured by obedience, but by the willingness to protect what mattered most. And in that moment, she felt a connection to every heartbeat, in every home, in every city across the planet, as if the collective spirit of humanity was whispering in her ear, urging her onward. She clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms, pain grounding her focus, and she raised her head high, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it not as one person but as the embodiment of every human who refused to kneel. The chamber seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the very walls recognized the turning of the tide. The decision was made, the die cast, and she walked away from the hologram, her shadow stretching long behind her into the corridor, where the future waited, uncertain, dangerous, but filled with the promise that no surrender could ever match. The corridors of the council building felt colder now. Her footsteps echoed against the stone walls, and every shadow seemed to whisper questions that she could not answer, doubts she could not ignore. Yet she pressed forward, each step a challenge to the fear that tried to settle in her chest. The council members she had left behind murmured among themselves, their voices low and sharp, carrying words she could not hear, but she could feel their unease, like a weight pressing on her back. The citizens outside the chamber had no idea of the storm brewing behind closed doors. They trusted her because they had to. They had no choice. Yet even as she walked, she wondered if their faith was enough to carry them through what was coming. Her mind flashed to the countless nights she had lain awake, listening to the cries of children in refugee camps, seeing the desperation in the eyes of parents forced to hide in shadows, fearing the strike of an enemy that promised peace but delivered death. She wondered if she was truly prepared to lead, if she could bear the weight of lives resting on her decisions. She had been trained in combat strategy, diplomacy, and survival, yet nothing had prepared her for the kind of responsibility that gnawed at her from the inside, the kind that made her question herself in the quiet moments. When no one was watching, she paused at a window overlooking the city below. The lights flickered in the gathering dusk, each home a testament to human resilience and fragility alike, and she felt a pang of guilt for even considering that she might fail to protect them. She clenched her fists, willing the fear to vanish, willing herself to be strong, yet a flicker of doubt remained, a shadow lurking at the edges of her mind. She thought of the enemies waiting beyond the borders, their fleets immense and merciless, their soldiers trained to exploit any weakness, and she knew that one mistake could cost thousands of lives. The pressure pressed on her chest. Her heart raced, but she could not falter. She could not yield. The whisper of doubt grew louder in the quiet hallways, echoing against stone and steel. She imagined the faces of her advisors, some hopeful, some terrified, each looking to her for guidance, and she realized that their fear mirrored her own. The difference was that she had to act. She could not hesitate. She could not crumble. The voice of humanity seemed distant yet insistent in her mind, urging her to keep walking, to keep fighting, to trust in the strength of the people who believed in her. She drew in a shuddering breath and reminded herself that doubt was natural, but surrender was not, that fear could be acknowledged, but courage required action. She tightened her grip on the strap of her satchel where maps and plans were stored, every folded line and notation, a symbol of the countless nights she had spent preparing for this very moment. She pressed forward into the chamber where the strategic advisors waited, their eyes meeting hers, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of their expectations. She acknowledged the tremor of doubt in her chest, but she would not let it control her. She would harness it to sharpen her instincts, to fuel her resolve, to transform uncertainty into unyielding determination. The enemy might expect hesitation, and she would give them none. She would stand unwavering, and prove that one human refusing peace could ignite the courage of an entire species, that even in doubt humanity could rise together to defy the darkness looming beyond the horizon. She emerged from the council chambers, into the streets below the city, alive with movement and the hum of human life, carrying the faint scent of smoke and metal. From the industrial districts far in the distance she walked slowly, letting the sounds of the city wash over her, people rushing past, unaware of the storm about to descend, yet she could feel their hearts beating in rhythm with her own, as if every footstep, every whisper, every glance shared the same unspoken hope. She turned a corner and found herself in the central square where the crowds gathered, not knowing why but drawn by a sense of purpose that pulsed through the air. The sun dipped low behind jagged skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the pavement, and she raised her head so that the light caught her face, illuminating determination etched into every line and curve. She stepped onto the platform that had once been used for ceremonial speeches, and silence fell over the crowd like a wave. People paused in mid-stride, children stopped playing, and merchants froze mid-gesture. Even birds seemed to hesitate in the sky above. They sensed something in the air, a change, a ripple of destiny passing through the streets. She drew a deep breath, her lungs filling with the weight of countless lives counting on her words, counting on her courage. She lifted her voice, and it carried strong and unwavering across the square. You have heard the threats, you have seen the lies. You have been told that surrender is the only way, but I will not bow, I will not yield, and we will not kneel. The crowd shifted as if pulled by an invisible force, their eyes fixed on her, faces etched with awe, and rising hope. Murmurs began to ripple through them, and she continued, each word a spark striking tinder. Humanity is stronger than fear. Humanity is united in ways the enemy cannot understand today. We choose to stand together, to protect what is ours, to defend every home, every child, every life. And in that moment, a ripple became a wave. People moved closer, their voices joining hers in a chorus of defiance. She saw the elderly nodding with pride and the young raising fists into the air, their energy contagious, their courage growing as if drawn from hers. She walked among them, shaking hands and placing hands on shoulders, feeling the pulse of their determination, as if it were a living thing flowing through the crowd, inspiring more to join them. Whispers became chants, chants became cries, and soon the square was alive with a roar that seemed to echo to the edges of the city and beyond. She knew that news would spread, that humans everywhere would hear and feel the call to rise, the call to refuse, the call to stand undivided. She paused, letting the sound wash over her, closing her eyes and imagining the entire planet rising together as one entity, a living force, unbroken by threats, unshaken by fear. And when she opened her eyes, she saw the faces of strangers transformed into allies of the spirit, their loyalty not forced but born from inspiration, from courage, from the certainty that they would follow this human who refused peace into whatever battle awaited. The horizon glowed red with the setting sun, and she raised her arms toward it, a gesture of challenge and hope, a signal that humanity was awake and united, and the enemy would soon learn that one voice refusing peace could awaken the courage of millions. She returned to the hidden chambers beneath the city, where the walls were lined with maps, screens, and tactical equipment. The faint hum of machinery and the scent of oil and metal filled the air. She spread the maps across the table, tracing the borders of the territories with her fingers, calculating distances, imagining supply lines and troop movements. The advisors gathered around her, their faces taut with anticipation and worry. They spoke in low, urgent tones, offering suggestions and warnings, but she listened carefully, weighing each word, filtering out fear and indecision, and choosing the path that would strike hardest at the enemy without sacrificing the lives of her people. She marked potential ambush sites, escape routes, and defensive positions, every notation a promise that humanity would not crumble. Every line a testament to foresight and preparation. She imagined the enemy forces massing beyond the horizon, their numbers vast and relentless, their strategies cold and methodical, but she saw their weaknesses, their patterns, their overconfidence, and she smiled faintly, knowing that preparation and unity could turn the tides. She assigned teams to different sectors, ensuring every human capable of defending their home had a role and a purpose. She moved through the room like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of resistance. Voices rose in discussion and debate, her calm clarity guiding every decision. She mapped supply routes for food, water, and medical aid, ensuring that civilians were protected even as soldiers prepared for combat. She reminded herself that strategy was not only about winning battles but sustaining the spirit of her people and keeping hope alive in their hearts. She called for drills and simulations, watching humans of all ages learning to work together, sharing knowledge, improvising solutions. She saw the spark of courage igniting in their eyes, the younger ones learning quickly, the older ones lending wisdom. Their movements, precise and determined, she walked among them, correcting mistakes, offering encouragement. Noting every improvement, every sign of growth, she coordinated communication networks, installing secure lines between towns, villages, and cities so that information could flow rapidly and misinformation would be contained. She studied enemy reports, analyzing weaknesses, their supply chains, and communication protocols. Imagining scenarios and contingencies and countermeasures, she held late-night meetings with the senior commanders, discussing fallback plans and diversionary tactics, debating possibilities and refining ideas until every angle was considered and every risk accounted for. She instructed engineers to construct defensive barriers and shelters, blending with the environment, ensuring that the city itself became a fortress that could protect and inspire at the same time. She reminded her team that their greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, but unity and morale, the knowledge that they were fighting for something worth dying for, that their courage would inspire generations beyond their time. She felt a weight of exhaustion pressing on her limbs but refused to let it slow her. Each moment spent planning was a moment earned for her people, and she would not waste it. As dawn approached and the first light touched the city, she stood before the maps and screens, her eyes scanning the layout, imagining the coming battle, feeling the pulse of humanity coursing through her veins. She whispered to herself, "The enemy will come, and they will see that we are not afraid, that we are united, that one human refusing peace can awaken the strength of an entire species." And with that thought, she turned to her advisors, ready to put the plan into action, knowing that the first move had been made, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first signs came at dawn, a distant rumble that rolled across the horizon like a storm warning. The sky was tinged with unnatural colors, smoke and dust rising from faraway outposts, signaling the approach of the enemy fleet. She stood on the balcony of the city command center, her eyes scanning the skyline, calculating trajectories and anticipating movements. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. Every drill, every plan, every strategy she had crafted led to this moment. Below her, the streets were eerily quiet, civilians huddled in shelters and barricaded homes, while soldiers took their positions ready to spring into action. She gave the orders through secure channels, her voice calm but firm, guiding her people like a conductor, leading a complex orchestration of survival. She saw the first flashes of light in the distance, the enemy ships cutting through the atmosphere, descending like predators, honing in on their prey. Alarms blared across the city, but she did not flinch. She had trained her people to react. She had prepared them for fear. She had turned uncertainty into strength. And now the test had arrived. The enemy struck with precision, their weapons aimed to destroy and intimidate. But humanity had learned to anticipate the strike. The defenses she had overseen came alive, barriers unfolded, automated turrets activated, and human fighters launched from hidden bays, striking with agility and cunning. The first wave of attacks crashed against the city walls, and her forces met them with unyielding resistance. Explosions rocked the streets, sending dust and debris into the air, but the humans fought as one unit, their movements coordinated, their morale unbroken. She moved among the command teams, issuing corrections and encouragement. Her presence, a beacon of determination and courage. On the ground, civilians assisted by supplying water and first aid, rushing to help the wounded. Even as another wave approached, she watched as young soldiers stood their ground, their fear transformed into resolve, their courage a mirror of her own. The sky above was a chaos of fire and smoke, ships descending and rising, fighters maneuvering deftly, dodging blasts. Every second stretched into an eternity, yet she remained steady, calculating every possibility, considering every risk, and directing her forces to exploit weaknesses. The enemy underestimated them, assuming that fear would dominate, hesitation would cripple them, but humanity had learned to adapt, improvising solutions. Faster than the attackers could react, she witnessed the first enemy craft fall, their hulls breaking apart in brilliant flashes of light, inspiring cheers that rose from hidden positions and echoed through the streets. The humans were not just surviving, they were fighting with skill and purpose. Her heart pounded not with fear but with exhilaration as the tide slowly began to shift. She could see the panic spreading among the enemy ranks, their confidence faltering. As every calculated strike was met with unexpected resistance, the humans moved like a living organism, each part knowing its place, each part feeding into the strength of the whole. She smiled faintly, seeing her plan in motion. The enemy had believed they would break them quickly, but they had misjudged the spirit of a species united. She knew the battle was far from over yet. The first strike had proven that even in the face of overwhelming force, one human refusing peace could ignite the courage of an entire population, and that courage would not be extinguished, it would only grow. And in the chaos and fire of the morning, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning. Humanity will rise and we will not kneel." The city had held, but the cost was immediate and undeniable. Smoke curled from shattered buildings and streets were strewn with debris. The cries of the wounded echoed through alleyways and the moans of the fallen hung heavy in the air. She moved among the chaos, her eyes scanning for the injured, her hands steady as she guided medics to those in need. Every life, precious, every moment, critical. Yet despite her determination, the weight of loss pressed upon her heart. She watched as comrades she had trained with fell to enemy fire, their faces etched with courage, but forever still in her memory. She felt the sting of grief sharpened by responsibility. Knowing that every decision she had made had led them into danger, yet she would not let sorrow paralyze her. The battle demanded focus, and the lives of countless others depended on her resolve. She knelt beside a young fighter whose leg had been shattered by shrapnel. The boy trembled, his eyes wide with fear and pain. She took his hand and whispered words of reassurance, urging him to hold on, that his bravery was not wasted, that humanity would survive because of the courage of people like him. All around her, humans rose to the occasion, carrying the wounded, shielding the vulnerable, risking their lives without hesitation, and she saw in their actions a reflection of her own unwavering will. The enemy pressed forward relentless, their strikes precise and deadly, yet every human countered with skill and determination. Every loss met with greater resolve, each sacrifice a reminder of what was at stake and why surrender could never be an option. She felt the sting of tears but swallowed them, knowing that emotion could not interfere with action. She directed squads to secure collapsed buildings and protect civilians, coordinating rescue efforts and defensive maneuvers with unyielding clarity. She could feel the pulse of the city, the heartbeat of humanity under siege, yet unbroken. She imagined the families, trapped in basements and shelters, their fear mirrored her own, and she redoubled her efforts, ensuring that every person had a chance to survive. She saw the smoke and flames take familiar structures and felt the pang of loss that would remain long after the battle. Yet she also saw courage in every eye, every hand raised in defiance, every fist clenched in solidarity. She understood that sacrifice was inevitable, that some would fall so that others could rise, and she honored each one silently, committing their memory to the future of humanity. She moved toward the front lines, directing reinforcements to vulnerable points. Her body tired and aching, yet her spirit unyielding. She understood that leadership meant bearing the burden of grief, while still inspiring hope and courage in others. She whispered to herself a prayer of defiance, a vow that their sacrifices would not be in vain, that the enemy would learn the strength of a species united by courage and love, that the flames of loss would forge an unbreakable determination, and in the midst of smoke and fire, the fallen and the living alike would stand together, guided by the one who refused peace and whose will would carry humanity through the darkest hours to a future they would claim with blood and bravery alike. The news of the first battle spread like wildfire across the cities and colonies of humanity, carried on encrypted channels, whispered and crowded markets and broadcast through hidden transmitters. The story of their courage reached distant planets and settlements where people had long feared that resistance was futile, yet hearing of the humans who had refused peace and fought back ignited something deep within them. Hope that had lain dormant now burned like a beacon, and she watched from the command center as reports poured in from every corner of the planet. Civilians had armed themselves. Improvised weapons, shields, and barricades appeared overnight, and volunteer squads formed with a speed that defied expectation. She smiled faintly, seeing her people rise not just in obedience but in understanding that they were part of something greater than themselves. The enemy had assumed that fear would rule humanity, that hesitation and doubt would fracture their unity. But they had miscalculated. The power of inspiration, the courage of a few, had become the rallying cry of millions. She held a meeting with commanders and strategists, their faces tense but brightened by the incoming reports, each human force operating with precision, improvising solutions to unexpected challenges, and she directed them with calm authority, adjusting strategies based on real-time updates, refining tactics and strengthening coordination between cities and outposts. She sent envoys to distant colonies communicating the victories and sacrifices, guiding them to organized defenses, and rallying messages that reminded them that they were not alone, that one human refusing peace could spark a movement across the stars. The enemy attempted propaganda claiming that humans were divided, that their resistance was doomed, yet every attempt only strengthened the resolve of those who had heard the truth of the first strike. The spark of courage had become a flame. A wildfire impossible to contain. Communities began to coordinate, building supply lines, training recruits, and fortifying positions, not because they were forced but because they believed in the possibility of survival and triumph. She walked through the crowded halls of the command center, seeing analysts, technicians, and volunteers working tirelessly, their energy contagious, their dedication unwavering. She addressed the assembled personnel, reminding them that every action mattered, that the smallest effort could save lives and tip the balance in their favor. Her words carried weight because they were true. Every human she met reflected the courage that had begun in her own heart. The enemy launched small probes attempting to disrupt the communication networks, but the humans had anticipated these moves. Redundant systems and quick responses ensured that messages continued to flow, inspiration spreading faster than fear. She watched as civilians trained alongside soldiers, children practiced first aid and emergency protocols, while adults reinforced defenses and organized supply chains. The spark of defiance had become a movement of unyielding energy and determination, and in every transmission, in every message, in every act of bravery, she felt the pulse of humanity growing stronger, a rhythm that could not be silenced. The fire she had ignited would sweep across the stars. The enemy would soon understand that the strength of humanity was not in numbers or technology alone, but in the courage of a species united by the will of one who refused peace and dared to ignite the spark that would awaken the heart of an entire galaxy. The battle had raged for days across the outer borders, and the skies were streaked with smoke, fire, and debris, yet humanity held firm, their defenses unbroken, and their resolve stronger than ever. She stood on the command balcony overlooking the city, the sun barely visible through the haze, casting long shadows across shattered streets and makeshift barricades. The enemy had expected hesitation and fear, but what they faced was unity, coordination, and a will that refused to yield. She studied the enemy formations, their ships moving in predictable arcs, their strikes coordinated but limited by overconfidence, and the assumption that humanity would crumble at the first real blow. She saw the gaps, the weak points, the overextended supply lines, and smiled faintly, knowing that the turning point was near. She called her commanders together, issuing precise instructions, redirecting forces, reinforcing the most threatened positions, and coordinating a counterattack that would strike where the enemy least expected it. Civilians and soldiers alike moved with purpose, their fear transformed into determination, their courage amplified by the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. Every squad, every patrol, every lookout had been trained and prepared for this moment. Improvisation and strategy blended seamlessly as human forces struck with efficiency and precision. The first wave of the counterattack hit the enemy like a hammer, breaking their rhythm and forcing retreat. In some sectors, chaos spread among the attackers, their overconfidence replaced by confusion, panic, and doubt. She moved among her teams, guiding reinforcements, adjusting plans, and ensuring communication lines remained open. The pulse of determination in the city was infectious. The humans had learned to read each other, anticipate moves, and act as a single organism. Their actions coordinated, their courage unwavering. She watched as enemy ships faltered, their formations breaking. Under pressure, human fighters striking decisively, exploiting every weakness, civilians joining in wherever possible, transporting supplies, guiding reinforcements, and providing crucial intelligence. The tide had begun to turn. The enemy had expected surrender and submission, but humanity had delivered strategy, courage, and unity in equal measure. She directed precision strikes on the enemy supply hubs, weakening their ability to sustain the attack, and watching as their morale crumbled under the pressure of unexpected resistance and relentless human determination. Every successful strike sparked celebrations among her people, each victory a signal that the impossible was becoming reality. She moved to the forward command centers, ensuring coordination of every maneuver, reinforcing the understanding that this was more than a battle. It was a declaration that one human refusing peace could lead a species to defy annihilation. The enemy attempted desperate maneuvers to regain control, but they were met with a wall of human resolve, soldiers standing their ground, civilians supporting the effort, engineers improvising defenses, and fighters striking with skill and determination. The energy of defiance radiated through the city, through every broadcast and message, the spirit of resistance spreading faster than fear. The enemy faltered, broken by the sheer force of unified courage and strategy. And in that moment, she knew the turning point had been reached. Humanity would no longer be underestimated, would no longer be dismissed, and the one who refused peace had proven that courage, strategy, and unity could rewrite the destiny of an entire species. The horizon glowed with the embers of the enemy retreat and the rising strength of a species awakened and unbroken. The battle was over, but the echoes of conflict lingered in the streets, the air still thick with smoke and the scent of scorched metal. Yet the humans stood victorious, their eyes shining with relief, exhaustion, and a quiet pride. She walked among them, observing the faces of those who had fought and survived, children clinging to parents, and parents holding one another, their fear replaced with awe and determination. She saw the wounded being carried to makeshift hospitals, and the engineers already repairing buildings destroyed by the enemy strikes. Every action a testament to resilience and courage. The cities were scarred, yet alive, and the people alive were stronger for what they had endured. She returned to the command center, where reports continued to arrive from distant colonies, ships that had fled before the enemy now returning with supplies, volunteers, and new recruits, eager to join the united effort. Humanity had learned that even across vast distances their courage could inspire and connect them. As she reviewed the messages, her mind traced the path from the first refusal of peace to the overwhelming unity and strength that now stretched across the planet and beyond. She recalled the sacrifices, the friends, the loved ones who had fallen, their memory etched into every decision, every strategy, every victory. Each of them had played a role in the awakening of a species that refused to kneel. She addressed the gathered leaders and citizens who had come to witness the new dawn, her voice steady, carrying through the hallways and into the hearts of those listening today. We remember those we have lost and honor their courage. Today we celebrate our unity and the strength that comes from refusing to bow. Today we claim a future that no enemy can take. And she saw in their eyes the reflection of hope, a light that could never be extinguished. The legacy of what had been achieved would stretch across generations, stories told and retold of the human who refused peace, and the millions who rose behind her, inspired by courage and conviction. Schools would teach their children of bravery and strategy, of sacrifice and leadership. Monuments would be built in memory of those who had given everything, and in every corner of the planet humanity would remember the lesson learned, that surrender is not the measure of survival, but unity, courage, and the willingness to fight for what is right. And as she looked out over the recovering city, the sun breaking through the haze and smoke, painting the streets in golden light, she understood that her choice had changed the course of history, that the spark she had ignited had become a wildfire, that no enemy could snuff out. That one human refusing peace had inspired the awakening of an entire species, and in that knowledge she felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet triumph that resonated in her chest and would echo forever in the hearts of humanity. The story would be told through generations, the refusal, the courage, the unity, and the victory. A reminder that even in the darkest hours hope and determination could prevail, that the legacy of one human, could shape the destiny of a world and a species, that humanity had risen together, unbroken, united and triumphant, and that legacy would endure beyond time, beyond fear, and beyond any enemy who might dare to challenge it.